Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We're not going to lose any more time. I think it's about time for us to go ahead and get it rolling. We're going to open up with the 4 short surahs, beginning with Al-Fatiha 4 times. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi wa huwa al-aliyyul azim. Al-Fatiha. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladina an'amta alayhim ghayru maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Ameen. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladina an'amta alayhim ghayru maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Ameen. Al-Fatiha. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladina an'amta alayhim ghayru maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Ameen. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladina an'amta alayhim ghayru maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Ameen. Siratal Ikhlas 4 times. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Kul huwallahu ahad. Allahu samad. Lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Kul huwallahu ahad. Allahu samad. Lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Kul huwallahu ahad. Allahu samad. Lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Kul huwallahu ahad. Allahu samad. Lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Surat al-Falaq. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Qul a'udhu birabbil falaq min sharri ma khalaq wa min sharri ghasiqin idha waqab wa min sharri nafathati fil 'uqad wa min sharri hasidin idha hasad. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Qul a'udhu birabbil falaq min sharri ma khalaq wa min sharri ghasiqin idha waqab wa min sharri nafathati fil 'uqad wa min sharri hasidin idha hasad. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Qul a'udhu birabbil falaq min sharri ma khalaq wa min sharri ghasiqin idha waqab wa min sharri nafathati fil 'uqad wa min sharri hasidin idha hasad. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Qul a'udhu birabbil falaq min sharri ma khalaq wa min sharri ghasiqin idha waqab wa min sharri nafathati fil 'uqad wa min sharri hasidin idha hasad. Surat al-Nas. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Qul a'udhu birabbil nas. Maliki nas ilahin nas min sharri waswasil khannas. Alladhi yuwaswisu fi sudurin nas min al-jannati wan nas. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Qul a'udhu birabbil nas. Maliki nas ilahin nas min sharri waswasil khannas. Alladhi yuwaswisu fi sudurin nas min al-jannati wan nas. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Qul a'udhu birabbil nas. Maliki nas ilahin nas min sharri waswasil khannas. Alladhi yuwaswisu fi sudurin nas min al-jannati wa nas. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Kul a'udhu bi rabbin nas, maliki nas, ilahi nas, min sharril waswasil khannas, alladhi yuwaswisu fi sudurin nas, min al-jannati wa nas. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad al-Fatih lima ubika wa katimi lima sabaka. Nasir al-Haqi bil-Haqi wa hadi ila siratika al-mustaqim wa ala alihi haqqa qadrihi wa miqdarihi alladhi. O Allah, we give thanks this day for this opportunity to share and to impart the wisdom that thou hast deposited in the great ones that have come before us, and to be participants in this process of learning, growth, development, and advancement on this Sufi path. We give thanks for the pioneers of our order, Sheikh Ahmad Dubamba, Sheikh Ibrafal, Serene Follows, Serene Sally Hu, and certainly for our Sheikh Sufi Ba, for this information that is lifting us, empowering the light that is us, and bringing us closer in proximity to thee. Make everyone on this call to be successful. Make us all hearers of thy divine will and thy divine way, and bring us up into thy light. Bake Sheikh Ahmad Dubamba, Bake Sheikh Ibrafal, Bake Serene Follow, Bake Serene Sally Hu, Bake Sheikh Sufi Ba, Bake Sheikh Sufi Ba, Bake Sheikh Sufi Ba. Ameen, Ameen, Ameen. Assalamu alaikum, family of light. How are we feeling on this evening?
Alaikum assalam, beloved.
Everybody good?
Feeling good like Allah should, as Sheikh Wali Farad would say.
Alhamdulillah. Ameen. Good to have everybody present and ready to delve into this numeric knowledge of living divine between the 1 and the 9. And quick question as we get started. Well, before we get started, first I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to thank Sheikh Sufi for the opportunity to present and to share some of this information. And again, looking forward to being present and seeing everybody live and in person at the Butterfly Retreat. Does anyone have any questions concerning what we spoke about on last week? I'm gonna do a very, very brief recap in case someone was not here on last week. It'll just take a moment. Last week, we did our disclaimer, definitions, history of numerology, and number systems, and we dealt with the number 0. And we went over the short surah of Al-Kafirun, the 109th surah of the Quran, which deals with those who are in disbelief about a lot of the things that are covered from a Sufi perspective. We also went into some numeric insights, talking about numerology and what it looked like prior to the 20th century, and the different cultures of numerology, be they Egyptian, Persian, Chaldean, Chinese, Japanese, indigenous America or ancient America, and numerous others. We also went into the number or the representation, the symbolic signature that is called the 0 or the cipher, and dealt with how that is the void from which everything emerges and comes into being, And we read a passage last week, and we want to continue that passage this week as we move into the information with the number 1. So does anybody have any comments or questions, or still some fuzziness about what we talked about last week? Okay, if not, then we're going to delve back in to what we were dealing with on last week and how that brings us into what we're going to be discussing this week, which is the numbers 1, 2, and 3. So last week at the close of class, Cheikh Farad read a passage for us. Let me see here, get the right slide. And this passage comes out of a book called The Mystery of Numbers by Anne Marie Schimmel. It's a 300-page book, and this small passage of it deals with numerology with respect to Islam and those great ones that came forth as a result of that. And what she's talking about in this brief passage is, 1, there is a group of people called the Ikhwan as-Safa, which is the Brotherhood of Purity. And this Brotherhood of Purity is a Sufi group that exists in the East, and they held a certain type of information with regard to numerology. As we talked about, numerology existed in all of our ancient cultures. And we talked about how this one called Enoch is also Hermes Trismegistus, and it is also, he's known by numerous different names, one of them being Tahuti or Thoth, but all of them are comprised in different names, whether it be Enoch, Hermes, Tahuti, Thoth. It's all representative of the same being bringing forth this information through different cultures. So with this Brotherhood of Purity, it talks about how numerology was a way to understand the principle of unity that underlies everything. The system of numerology underlies every system that is used. And with that, we want to emerge into the understanding of this number 1 coming out from the 0, and how this being coming out from the void of the triple blackness of space, represented symbolically by the 0, is what we are all manifestations of as we go through the 1 through 9 numerically. So moving forward with what was written in this book, The Mystery of Numbers, it says, the science of numbers, is a science that is above nature and yet is the root of all other sciences. Thus, the relation of God to the world or of pure being to existence is equated with the relation of the one to the other numbers. Although Ikhwan as-Safa did not create a complicated system of numerology compared to that of Kabbalah, they were aware of the importance of numbers as seen in music and in the order of the cosmos alike. So what she's saying is that the system that she came upon with respect to the Sufis did not appear to be as complex as the system of numerology that exists in the Jewish Kabbalah system. Is really a matter of understanding. As we talk about with Sufism, one of the roles of Sufism is to make the complex simple. So we break things down to its simplest understanding so that everyone could benefit from it. But there are deep treasures in the stories that appear to be simple, but there are treasures in them. And this is the way that masters have spoke throughout the course of history. It sounds like they're saying one thing, but when you dig deep into it, you find layers upon layers upon layers of meaning yet to be uncovered. And this is what was presented by this so-called brotherhood of purity and this Sufi system that was back in the day, so to speak. So as we come forward with this and with the understanding of relating this number one to all of the other numbers, it's like relating Allah, or us coming forth in the form of Allah as a form of creation, and how we have a connectedness with everything that is around us. We are nature, and nature is a part of us. We are the earth, and we are comprised. Our physical body is comprised of the earth. We are comprised of earth, wind, air, and fire, and all of those elements have their effect on our physical vessel. So there's a marriage between these things and a congruency that runs between these things, showing that we are all very much interrelated. And this science of numerology is a science by any name that unites all of these things together. Just as we did in all of our ancient sciences, we were able to tie in things that didn't appear to be related, but they are related because it springs forth from the same system, emerging out of this void, this triple blackness of space, and coming into concrete physical existence in the now time. Does anyone have any questions about what we've read so far? Okay. It says that finally, the number 28 is the most perfect of all numbers. Now, you're going to hear that with respect to a lot of different numbers, because in each different system, different ones say that different numbers are sacred. The Chaldeans talk about the number 9 being sacred. In fact, they don't even use it in their numerological calculations because it's so sacred. In Egypt, the number 7 was sacred. The number 19 was sacred. So each one has their favorite, so to speak, of what they comprise perfection in as a number. But this number 28 is important because when we break everything down, you add the 2 and the 8 together, you get 10, and 1 plus 0 gives you 1. So the reason why they use the 28 as being a perfect number is because it ties into what's called lunar mansions or a lunar month. The month that it takes the moon to go through the 12 signs of the zodiac. It's called a lunar month. And within those signs are what they call mansions. So it's 28 of them. The process from new moon to full moon and from full moon back to new moon is the 28-day process. So what this tells you is that the people that are talking about this 28 being a perfect number, it tells you that they're putting a lot of emphasis on the moon and the lunar system, much like it's done in the Islamic system. We put a lot of emphasis on the lunar calendar. That's how we determine our Muslim months. That's how we determine our days of celebration and days of importance based on the moon. So it's a lunar cycle. This all has its origin way, way back. So it corresponds to this lunar mansion and is, of course, connected with Islam. And Muslims utilize ancient Sufis, let's put it that way, utilize that system of relating a number to a letter and a letter to a number. That was all part of the process of breaking everything down so that we can understand what the numbers symbolically represent. Michael Jackson and the Jackson Fives said ABC is as simple as 1, 2, 3. Then they got musical and threw the musical scale in there and started talking about do, re, mi. So all of these things scientifically are connected. The one relates to the A, and it also relates to the do on the musical scale. It's all connected within our system. And just a simple song like that is an example of how those things are tied together. So it's a science that we're talking about with respect to the science of living divine between the 1 and the 9, the science of numbers is not just happenstance, it's information that is required for mastery. Any comments so far? Any questions? Or something that I need to clarify a little bit more? Let me check some chat and get my Zoom literacy up. Cheikh talks about the divine 7, yes. And I can't wait to get to that number 7 because we got a lot to delve into with respect to that. And he also says that that 28 is tied to tuba. Interesting. Interesting. Like they say, that 28 is considered one of the perfect numbers in that system. And it don't get much more perfect than tuba. I mean, thanks so much for that, Cheikh. Any other comments? If not, it's time to look at this number 1. The symbol and symbolic expression of the number 1. And right off the bat, when we're dealing with the number 1, we're dealing with unity. The number 1 represents unity in Queen Latifah terms. That's what the 1 represents. 1 has no equal. Beautiful thing about 1 is you can't divide anything into 1. It's just 1. And it is inclusive and represents the inclusion of all of the other numbers. Number 1, this represents, as we talked about last week, first being manifested or coming forth into manifestation out of the void, out of the number 0, that triple darkness of space. And as Sheikh Sufi taught, we are all representations of the Nur or the light of Muhammad. And all of us represent a piece or part of that light. The first thing, or the number 1 that was created or is created, is Muhammad. And from that, everything else comes into being. That is symbolically represented by the number 1. It is the Aleph, the divine essence, the line of infinity with no beginning and with no end. That's what the number one represents. Let me see, I got some chat action here. The one stands alone. Anything multiplied by one remains the same. Correct, absolutely. Anything that you times the number one by, you're gonna get that same number again. That's the beauty of the number one. And to take a step back, when we look at the number zero, or the expression or symbolic representation of the number zero, anything that you times the zero by, you're gonna get zero. And if you try and add anything or subtract anything with the zero, you're gonna get that same number. So this is the science that we look at with respect to this number. Sister Safran says, one is the magic number by Jill Scott, one of her favorite numbers. And this is also Sister Safran's life path, which is true. There's a lot of power and energy in a life path one. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but life path ones really, as they grow into mastery, they harness all of this energy that could be utilized in each number from 1 through 9. Just by getting a mastery of this number one. We'll deal more with that as we move on. But the number one also symbolizes the Shahada of Muslims. There is no deity, there is, well, I like to translate. There is no source, there is only Allah. And Muhammad is his messenger. That's our profession of faith. And it is also the unity of our faith. It is around which everything in our faith revolves, around our declaration of that statement and making that known. So the Shahada is an essential part of this number one energy. The number one also represents unity and oneness. It represents the ultimate unity and oneness. It symbolizes the divine source, the primordial energy from which everything originates. It signifies the interconnectedness of all things and the inherent unity in the universe. Creation and manifestation. The number one is associated with creation and manifestation. It represents the beginning, the seed of potential, the power to bring ideas and desires into reality. It is considered the number of new beginnings and a fresh start. That's key with respect to the number one, because whatever we're going through, wherever we find ourselves, whatever mess we find ourselves entangled in, we can always go back and start at one. Make a new beginning wherever we are. And we talk about this quite often with respect to cycles. We can begin a new cycle whenever we decide to. We have the power to do that based on coming forth and emerging and carrying the light, the original light of the one, out of the darkness of space. So with that, we're able to begin a new cycle when we choose. Now, yes, it is helpful to have an alignment of a moon cycle or a solar cycle or a day of the week or an hour of the day or an astrological placement or what have you. Those things can be helpful. But even without that, if we get the impulse to start a new cycle or the revelation to start a new cycle, we can do that at any time. And this is how we take control and begin to exercise mastery of these numbers by moving forward based on what is revealed and given to us, as opposed to trying to exist in a cookie cutter system and thinking that we are restricted to that. All of these characteristics, attributes, and traits that we talk about with respect to numerology, these were comprised over many, 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 many years. But it's not everything that that symbolic signature or number represents. It is some of those things. It kind of like gives you the walls and sort of a foundation to stand on. But once we have that foundation and we have that structure, we're able to expand beyond that once we get the understanding of what that energy represents. So it's not to imprison us, nor is it to be something where we feel that we're bound to, which is some of the arguments that come forth with respect to our ancient sciences of, oh, you're believing in a number or you're stuck to a particular astrological sign. That's the purpose of the Sufi path, is to grow up into masters so that we understand some of these cycles that work for us and that sometimes does not work in our best favor at a particular moment. But once we understand how these cycles work and how they're just moving us forward and moving around us, teaching us lessons, then we understand how to navigate around, through, and over these apparent obstacles, because that's just what they appear to be. Any questions thus far? I don't want to yap too long about that. Does anybody have any questions or comments dealing with this symbol of number 1?
Assalamu alaikum, Cheikh Idris, can you hear me?
Yes, wa alaikum salam. It's good to hear you.
We thank Allah for you. One of the things that came up for me, you said a combination of things about the life path number 1 and the mastery. And so for me, when I think about my life path number being 1, but also coupling that with my empathic abilities and my intuitiveness, how it's really, really magnified. And I appreciate the gift, but also it causes me to feel really ungrounded, right? So for me, I'm thinking when you're saying it's important for us to know like the things like alignment and, you know, whether, you know, the moon is void, of course, and just these different placements, but at the same time, appreciate our gifts. Like for me, at the same time, appreciate that my intuition might be something I need to go on right now and not necessarily be trying to figure out like, is the moon void, of course, or like, you know, where's the sun placement right now? So just like, I guess finding that balance, that's what stuck out for me, is just like a part of my mastery is trusting in my gifts and moving forward in my gifts in a grounded way.
Thank you for sharing that. That's very, very, very important with respect to that number 1 energy, being grounded. For those, well, we haven't gotten to any of that yet, that sister's talking about, Sister Safra, but she's talking about her life path. And we're going to get to those things a few weeks from now after we go through the numbers. But to make it simple, your life path number is the number that is comprised of the month that you're born, which is a number, the day of the month that you're born on, and then the year that you're born in. You add all of those numbers together and reduce them to a single number. And that's how you get your master number, or your life path number, correction. That's how you get your life path number that she's speaking to. And Sister Safran has put herself out there and she's letting everybody know she's a 1. So watch out. That's what her life path number equates to. Now, with respect to that, we actually, you kind of prophesized and spoke into this next slide that we're going to be talking about, because it actually deals with all of those things with respect to the number one, including remedies and things to help you balance out some of the energy of the number one. So this will help answer that question. This slide says the number one stands in symbolism for the sun. So each number is represented by a planetary body. In numerology, the sun is representative of the number one. And it's the beginning from which the other 8 numbers are created. Again, same concept. We're all created from that one Nur Muhammad. The number system coming out of the 0, all of the other numbers are created from this number one. It's telling a story. Each of these numbers have a story to tell. And the story of numerology, or the science of numbers, is telling us the story of nature and telling us about our story and how we can better understand what's going on around us and some of the things that are affecting us and some of those things that we are experiencing. This is all part of the story. Sufis are storytellers. So as we tell stories, we're also telling our divine story and putting our divine sciences in it. That's the power that we have to understand when we're talking about the science of numbers and all the rest of our sciences. So in terms of attributes and traits that you can look for with respect to a number one, or a person that carries the number one, and this is a person that carries a number one, whether it be on their life path, as I just described, or whether it's the day that they're born. The day that they're born could be on the 1st, on the 10th, on the 19th, or on the 28th. Any of those 3 days, any of those 4 days reduces to the number one. So all of those number one traits are represented by leadership, being independent, authoritative. Ones like to be in control, which is good. They like to be able to control what's taking place around them. To the extreme, that represents control issues. To the extreme of authoritative, it could be being very bossy. To the extreme of being independent, it could be someone who doesn't accept help when help is offered, or help could really get you over something that you're butting your head against. It also represents a person that's very, very pioneering, going into new areas, not following the herd, so to speak, where you're not looking in a monkey see, monkey do type of mentality. You're gonna forge forward into your own fields. Ones are also very, very focused on whatever it is their goal is. They don't like focus. They have focus in abundance. They're also very, very determined. You're not gonna steer them from what their desired path is very easily. And ones represent being self-reliant. Now, of course, when we talk about self-reliant, we think of self-created, self-existence. All of these are attributes that describe the one source from which we emerge. And that's why it is represented in this symbolic signature of the number one. Does anyone have any questions or comments about that one energy so far?
Bismillah, Sheikh. What's up, man? This is
Hey, what's going on, brother? Bismillah.
yo. It's fire, man. It's fire. So as you're talking about the one, I'm thinking about the Matrix, right? Now
Uh-huh.
they have like that setup. It's all zeros and ones, right? I was just thinking about how, like, when we think about the attribute of the one, if we have the zero, whether if it's in front or behind, it's definitely going to add something to that one.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a one would be self, and a zero is a portal, right? The
Right.
zero is like is unlimited potential. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So in other words, we have unlimited potential when we're dealing with self. When we see that one and zero, the way it's like set up in the movie The Matrix,
Mm-hmm.
like the code. You know what I mean?
Right.
Now, there's always a zero either behind the one or in front of the one.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like the way that things are set up, it could go either or. Different possibilities, different ways of being, and it's kind of like this life, literally, like different ways that you can experience this life. Because you would be the one who's going into the portal. Now, even when we look at Neo, right? We look at Neo is when you twist the letters up, it gets to one.
Mm-hmm.
But he was the leader. He was the one who was that everybody was waiting for. You know what I'm saying? He was the one to really kick everything off. Like, you know, it's just dope. It's just dope as I'm hearing you talk about it, and it's reminding me kind of the Matrix. You know what I mean?
That's interesting that you bring that up, because one of the things that's important is, can anybody tell me why in the Matrix, the only two symbols that you see is the zero and the one? I want to see if anybody was really, really listening. It's just zeros and one on that green lettering and black background.
Salam, can I chime in?
Oh, by all means.
Praise Allah. It's brother Noor Muhammad. I don't really know for a fact. I'm just shooting at it, to be honest. I got two ideas.
Come on with it.
Even positive and negative, or just the fact that they talk about computers and all that, and they talk about the idea of a code underlying reality. So the zeros and the ones is binary code.
Binary code, yes. Okay. Very good answer. So why are those the only two numbers used in binary code? We're gonna go a little deeper.
Bismillah, is it because it literally makes up everything? When you look at the zero, right? Like, all right, this is what I'm saying is bugged out. When you look at the zero, it's closed. When you look at the one, it literally stands by itself.
Mm-hmm.
Every number that comes after 0 and 1 is literally either a break of 0 or has the embodiment of 1 inside of it. Like when you look at the 7, right? The 7 is a 1 just tilted, and it has just like a steep left of a 1. In other words, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I feel like it's just literally like the platform for every number, 0 and 1.
Awesome.
And 8 is 2 zeros just on top of each other. You know what I mean? When you turn it to the right or left, it'll be like an infinity sign. But they're literally 2 small zeros.
Awesome. Awesome. Very good answer. Anybody else want to get in on that?
I just wrote in the chat, Idris, that what came up for me was energy, so the balance of masculine and feminine,
Mm-hmm.
to cause creation. So to me, that's what I was thinking with 0 and 1. The reason.
Nice. Nice. Anybody
Walaikum
else?
salam. Walaikum salam, Sheikh Idris.
Wa alaikum salam, great one.
Yes, I would love to chime in. I think that was brother Lamine that was just speaking, and a lot of what he was just mentioning or speaking to, if I'm not mistaken, if that was brother Staffeloff, if that wasn't, but still the word sound that was coming forward, a lot that he was speaking to was points to what I studied for a little bit and kind of introduced was the Dogon counting. And then that, and in the Dogon counting system, they specify recognizing the zero, which is infinite potential. It represents their infinite potential. And then there's a Dr. Ibo, who goes into the science of the quantum mechanics, and he talks about how all the molecular structures in the universe is just one molecule, is just one molecule next to another one. That so each number is just a one, it's two ones really to makes a two. And when we look at the actual the glyph of the numbers, the shaping, when you get to a 7, the 6 has the curve, like 0 is the full curve, then the 1 stands alone. Then the 2 has a curve, and then the 1, the straight line at the bottom. Then the 3 has the 3 curves, and so on, all the way up to when the Dogon counting, they switch up the 9 and the 8. So after the 7, you would count 9, 8, 10, and that, if you look at the numbers in a sequence, the shapes, the actual shapes of all the numbers, then that more so lines up in that sequence. So Astaghfirullah, alhamdulillah, I just wanted to chime in on that with the brother was speaking of.
Alhamdulillah, boy, y'all are on it. Y'all are on it, man. The light in this Darrah is absolutely incredible. I can't even see. I'm gonna need some shades. But anybody else want to get in on that as well?
Bismillah. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir. Bismillah.
Alhamdulillah. Like, what y'all making me think about is this, it's like when you got like an alarm clock or something, you got an alarm clock and it got like a certain type of digital, like I guess like little light bulbs or something. But the alarm clock got like it look a certain way, and it's able to make all the numbers just from the template of the 0 and the 1, and it's just spread shit across. I mean, my bad. It's just spread stuff across the 0. You know what I mean? It's just making different lines connecting the 0. Like some brother, I think they said it was like a void or like a portal. So now I'm really starting to see that. So alhamdulillah, that's what I wanted to say.
Alhamdulillah. I'm loving this, man. Well, we going all kind of places with this wisdom. High science. Anybody else? I don't want to leave nobody out.
Assalamu alaikum, Cheikh.
Wa alaikum salam.
So with the ones and the zeros, it has me thinking about the book called The Art of War. And in The Art of War, it talks about action and inaction and how both of them are the same. So it's basically the 1 and the 0 is the same. It's just like the 1 is the manifestation of the 0, if that makes sense. Right? So like the 0 is the infinite capability. So that would be like the passive motion. And the 1 is the action. And then I start looking at numbers and signs and symbols as tools. So when I look at the 1 and 0, I kind of put them together and they kind of look like a chain link. If you set it up like in a vertical sense, right, it looks like a chain link. And like synchronicities would be the key to reaching God consciousness, right? So when you have the 1s and 0s, it's a makeup of everything. So everything is ultimately leading up and chaining you into Allah, but you have to find your synchronicity in order to lead you there. If that makes sense.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thanks so much.
I said thank you.
Wa alaikum salam. Okay. All of you are right on point. Right on point. One of the answers, I guess, which will be the culmination of all of your answers. I see someone put in the chat, the 0 and the 1 is an example of the masculine and the feminine. Absolutely true. You just mentioned the action and the inaction. All of those are absolutely correct. What I was putting forth with respect to the 0 and the 1, which all of you spoke to, is that the 1 coming out of the 0 represents action because it's coming out, manifestation, whereas the void would be sort of inaction, as was stated. But with respect to the matrix, those are the only 2 symbols that you really need, is the 0 and the 1. That's why they use it in binary. Every number or any number that you want to get to, you can get to by increments of 1. And the 0 holds the space because it's the space out of which all of the numbers come from, starting with the 1. And all of the numbers, as we said earlier, can be contained in the 1 because the 1 is from which all of the other numbers were created. So if you got the 1 and the 0, you have the totality of everything. That's why they use those 2 numbers in binary code. It's not happenstance. And each one of you spoke to that point and an aspect of that point, which is phenomenal. So I'm glad that that's at least clear so that we understand and better understand the 0 and the 1. I'm gonna move on a little bit because we could be on this 1 for the next couple of hours by itself. Up to the law. The other attributes are lessons. We're going to the lessons now of the number 1. Each number, and Sheikh Sufi brought this forth, and is going to be talking about this with respect to astrology. It also ties to numerology as well. But each number or astrological sign has its what's called positive traits. And then it also has its challenges, which means things that you have to learn to master. They call it negative, and it can certainly be that in some instances, but it's really places where we need to exercise our mastery to overcome. It's those things that's going to challenge us and test our will. So when it comes to the number 1, the places where mastery can take place is learning how to follow. Again, the number 1 is a leader. The flip side to that is they have to learn sometimes how to take a backseat. They have to learn when to lead and when not to lead, and when to be led. So that's one of the lessons or challenges of the number 1. Another lesson is how to pace their energy. 1 is an energetic number. We just talked about how there's inaction, which represents the 0, and the 1 represents action or movement. So with that energy, you have to learn how to pace that energy so that you don't burn yourself out, which is what a lot of people who are dealing with that 1 energy, they're always pioneering and leading and forging and forcing, that they end up burning themselves out because they haven't yet learned how to pace themselves and balance that with learning how not to force, learning the system of the yin and the yang, which we'll deal with when we get to the number 2. But that's part of the numeric process. And the other thing is learning how not to always force things. Charging ahead is not always the best strategy. So learning how not to always do that. Someone has a question. I see a hand.
So, assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Walaikum salam.
So for my birth number, it's 5, but it's 14 as well. So would I do 1 and 4 when you're
Okay,
going
now
through
which number are we talking about? That's your life path number, the day that you're born? Which number?
That's my my life path number is
Life path number,
14.
okay. Gotcha.
So would I look at the 1 and the 4, or would I do the 5? Or do I do both?
You know, you bring up a phenomenal question that we haven't got to, probably won't really touch on as much in this class, but maybe a little bit when we get to talking about master numbers and angel numbers. In the Chaldean numerology system, the double numbers being everything from 10 and up to 99, all of those have a meaning. So what we're looking at is breaking everything down to a single digit number, except the master numbers, of course. We're breaking everything down to a single digit number. In the Chaldean system, when it's a double number, like you're talking about, 14, which is 2 numbers, that has a meaning also. When we're looking at numerology as we're doing it, we break that 14 down to a 5. However, when I'm doing charts and when I'm talking to people about numerology or tarot, or it may even come up in astrological readings, etc., I do include that number 14 and what that means also with respect to it breaking down to the number 5. So to answer your question, yes, we break that 14 down to the number 5, but that number 14 also have a meaning. And we will learn that also, what that 1 and 4 represent as well.
Awesome. Okay. I have one more question if you don't mind. So
Yes.
I have a book as a PDF. Do you mind if I send it to you after the Zoom call to see like if you've seen this book before? Is a good book to read before I just like invest my my time into reading it? It is like bad information or something.
What's the name of it?
So let me go ahead and go to my PDFs real fast.
But you can send it to me.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's gonna be real quick if I send it over. All right.
Yeah, there's a number of different books on numerology, and as we go forward, I'm going to tell you the ones that I learned from that were kind of a foundation for me. I tell you one now, Lloyd Strahan was the one that I started with way back in the day, and I've kept up with that one. And there's some others that we'll get into. Some of the information is in the books. Some of the information is not in the books. So it comes 2 ways, and it's good to have both. But yeah, definitely send me that, and we can get to the meat of what it's talking about.
Okay, thank you. I'm about to send it right now.
Alhamdulillah. Any other questions or comments so far?
Cheikh Idris, I noticed that at the bottom of the page that you have up, it's listing a color and a crystal and a day, and I just wanted to see if you were going to touch on that for each number, or should we talk about that now?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. We're going to get into that with every number.
Okay. So is that a part of like the balancing out, like if you're connected with that, like we're talking about 1 and you're talking about the flip side of it, like from, you know, being a leader to being bossy, or, you know, the things like that. So are those things related to having the balance, helping with the balance of connecting with the number 1?
Yes, we're going to talk about that balance as we get down there.
Okay.
And if I don't, remind me.
Inshallah. Appreciate you.
Alhamdulillah. Next, we're going to talk about the attributes. Each number is tied to an attribute of Allah. And there's more, but I just listed 3 for us to look at. The first attribute is Al-Ahad. Then there's Al-Wahid. And there's Al-Awwal. I actually got 4. The 4th one is Al-Wadaniya. All of these are talking about oneness of Allah. And all of these attributes can be utilized and helpful in understanding the number one. Understanding that attribute or that aspect of the divine helps us to understand the energy that is comprised within that numeric symbol. Chants that we could utilize with respect to the number one is Allah Ta'ala, Allah Ta'ala, which means Allah is one. We can use Allah Ta'ala, or we can use La ilaha illallah. Allah is the only reality. There's just one reality, and that's Allah. So all of this could be utilized to help understand and to balance and to keep our focus in this number one vibration. And of course, when we talk about Tawheed, does anybody know what Tawheed represents? I know everybody knows what Tawheed means. You can just say oneness of Allah, very simple. The oneness of Allah. And there's three Tawheeds: the oneness of divine lordship, the oneness of worship and devotion, and the oneness of divine names and attribute. These three are Sufi concepts that identify the oneness of Allah. As we continue to move down this Sufi path, we're going to understand and begin to see that it is so many layers to this Sufi path. So many layers, so many different terms, so many identifications. But all of these things that's on this page speaks to one thing, and that's oneness, the number one. And all of these other things are just kind of surrounding, identifying and describing aspects of that oneness. That's the beauty of it. As we get to the colors, the color for the number one, I just used one, and that's the number red. Excuse me, that's the color red. Color red is tied to one because one is a number that is reflective of the sun's energy. So one is tied to the sun, but numerologically speaking and astrologically speaking, there's a little bit of Mars in there too, because Mars represents movement, activity, and energy as well. And as we began to study more, we began to see how there are some aspects of the sun and Mars that kind of overlap and interchange. But red is the color that could be utilized. But with respect to the number one, there's a number of colors that could be utilized. The dominant one being the red, but it could also be a burnt orange color, because that's the color of the sun at sunset. It could also be the different aspects of red, like coral and garnet and all of these other types of red that exist. But these are the colors that represent the number one. The crystals that represent the number one, again, there's a number of crystals that could be utilized for each of these numbers, but I put three of the quote unquote top crystals that could be utilized, which is garnet, ruby, and citrine. And then of course, the day of the week is Sunday. Now back to Sister Safran's question, talking about balancing. When we're talking about the number one, and we're talking about balancing that, let's start with the attributes. By just focusing on the attributes of oneness will help to balance that one energy if you feel that you're out of balance in your one energy. Focusing on Tawheed, the oneness of Allah. Just by focusing on that and not seeing things in individual parts, that can help you balance that one energy when you feel it's kind of out of whack. When you feel that your one energy is out of balance, you might not want to put on the color red, because that's going to accentuate that energy that you're experiencing. Same thing with crystals. If you're utilizing a ruby or garnet or red crystals, that also enhances a vibration that you're already in. So if you're out of balance, you might not want to utilize that. And while we're on crystals, let me just say this. Crystals are not a set it and forget it stone. It's not, I just purchased this from the store, I'm gonna cleanse it and set it on my altar, or set it in a space on a wall or on a shelf, and then it's done. You have to work with crystals. You have to charge crystals. You have to infuse energy that you're speaking forth into crystals so that it can activate what you're putting into it. Just like with everything else, all of the things that we do in terms of work, by fall, we are putting our energy into something so that it can produce a certain type of effect, so that it can produce a certain type of experience or reward, or satisfy a certain type of requirement. That's the same thing with crystals. Everything that is around you has to be programmed by you. Otherwise, you find yourself in a situation where it's just picking up information, and most of the stuff around us is negative. So if you're not positively infusing your energy into it in the right way, it's gonna pick up a lot of the stuff that's in your environment, and it's not necessarily gonna work in your favor. Everything that is in our purview, in our sight, in our environment, are part of the posts that we are patrolling, or that we are standing on, or that we have a certain type of control over. We have to begin to exercise that mastery of that. We just can't leave it to happenstance. So this is how we balance that energy. With respect to the color, instead of red, you want to wear white when your energy is out of balance, because white is a reflective color and it's not taking in a lot of negativity that might be coming to you, or you're in a state of white where a lot of those negative and dark thoughts don't have the same hold if you're wearing something white. I heard Sheikh Sufi say that he was going to be wearing white for a certain period of time, and that's part of the process of making sure that you're purifying yourself. The more purified you are, the less out of balance you are. And this is a color that helps, the color white, with that purification. So yes, instead of wearing red when your number one is out of balance, you want to wear something like a white or a light color. When you want to empower, or you feel that you're not forging forward enough, or you're not having the right type of energy to do the things that you want to do, then you would wear red. Then you would utilize garnet and ruby and those type of crystals to help power your energy forward and work with your energy to bring things into existence the way that you want to. Did I make that somewhat clear? I'm going to assume that that is the case. So that's how we move. Bismillah.
Oh no, I was saying absolutely, it's clear. It's a great breakdown.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. So that's how we're rolling with the number 1 energy. Now we're gonna move into the number 2. And right off the bat, the number 2 stands for the Ba. Second letter of the Arabic alphabet, and also the energy of Bamba, Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, and our order. We take the name Ba, which represents this Morid order of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, and that family, that lineage, and the power that is transferred down through the energy of that Ba in lineage, spiritual lineage and tradition. It is the reality of the Hadith Qudsi. I was a treasure and wanted to be known. How many times have we heard Sheikh Sufi state that with respect to Allah saying, I was a treasure and wanted to be known? It's talking about how this number 2 represents the divine mirror. It's also saying that in reality, it's just the number 1 with a mirror. So the number 2 represents many different things and many different forms of duality. And there's tons of different expressions of duality. It's you, me, male, female, yes, no, east, west, alive, dead, right, left, yin, yang, as we mentioned earlier, not the yin yang twins, but yin and the yang, the energy that is reflective and balancing of everything that is in creation. 2 is a phenomenal number because spiritually, when we look at spiritual concept and spiritual beings that have come forward, 2 is a number that is reflective of that energy. In Egypt, the so-called netters came forth or were created in 2s. You know, Isis and Osiris or Osar and Aset, Tahuti Mayat, on and on and on. Everything was created in 2s or united in 2s. And it's the same thing when we look at different spiritual systems, starting with our own, the Murid system. Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, Sheikh Ibrahim, 2. Very much mirroring one another. Here in the West, you can look at Master Farad Muhammad and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, 2 mirroring one another. Later on, you can look at the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, 2 actually mirroring one another, one being the face that's out there and the other being behind the scene. But that produced a very, very powerful combination and a result for the building of the movement. There was always 2. We look at 5% Nation, Father Allah and Justice, 2. You see one, generally you see the other. This is a concept of duality that represents this number 2. And it symbolizes how everything comes into being from the 1, gradually moving into a state of duality, which is sort of a split in physical terms where one is reflecting the other, but they actually mirrors one of the other. So these are some of the things that the 2 represent moving forward. You see here, okay. The other thing that the 2 symbolizes is our approach to the world, which is dual in nature. There's always good and there's evil. There's, from the Christian perspective, God and the devil. There's always this exchange of one wrestling against the other, or one balancing itself really against the other. Neither is really ruling at the same time, but both of them are just kind of keeping the balance, which lets you know that there's something above all of that that's actually in charge with respect to that system. But it's how we keep balance with respect to this concept of duality. Ron Bay say it takes two to make the thing go right. It's got to be a balance of two somewhere in order for there to be balance established, synthesis to take place. So with the number two, two also represents one that is tactful, sensitive, peace-loving, cooperative, intuitive, supportive, empathetic, protective, balanced, and diplomatic. Twos are very diplomatic, the diplomats. Two is, of course, ruled by the moon. And people that are twos, they're very imaginative. Lessons for mastery for this number two is not getting stuck in your feelings. That is a key for people that are number two. Not only not getting stuck in your feelings, but not getting stuck in anything. Because one of the things that happen with respect to that is when we get stuck or feel stuck, depression sets in. And when we look at our society at large here in the West, and to some extent other parts of the world, but even more so here in the West, depression is huge. Mental imbalance is huge. The overwhelming majority of the society is on some kind of meds. I promise you. So establishing balance, and one of the reasons for that is because the moon is the closest planetary body to this planet. So it's going to wield a certain effect that is going to be felt more so in many instances by the people of this planet. Moon also governs mind. So when you talk about imbalances and being on meds, that's all a part of the moon and is represented by the number two. Lessons of mastery, again, not getting stuck in your feelings, staying positive, and properly processing emotions is key. Stuff is going to keep coming at us in different ways, but we have to always stay positive, constructively positive, so that we're not going down the ladder into places of negativity that don't serve us. Attributes that we can look at for the number two. Of course, that's Ar-Rahman, which Sheikh Sufi tells us represents the feminine aspect of creation. There's Al-Latif, and there's also As-Salam, because two also deals very much with peace. They're the peacemakers, or the lovers of peace. Color for blue, the color for the number two is a number of colors, but in particular, light green, white, and sky blue. And crystals, pearl, clear quartz, moonstone is also a good number, a good crystal rather, for the number two. Does anyone have any questions or comments about this number two before we round this out with the number three? Let me make sure I'm not missing anything in the chat here. No questions or comment about that number two? Okay. We'll move on to the number 3. Continuing to live divine between this 1 and this 9. The third number is the number 3, which can be written as 2 plus 1. So the number 3 represents the endless ocean of power, the world of subtle creations such as angels, jinn, and light beings. The number 3 represents 3 stages of life, beginning, middle, and end. The number 3 is a complete number, which provides success, long journeys, and wealth. You are a source of inspiration to others if you're representing or when you're representing this number 3, and you will definitely get whatever you want in life utilizing the influences of this number 3. Now, when we talk about the number 3, one of the things that's important is the 3 is an offspring of the 1 and the 2. When we think of the number 3, we think of Trinity. We think of the spiritual being having human experiences. And the way that that is manifested is in the Trinity of mother, father, child. Horus, Aset, Osar, Aset, and Horus. That Trinity is what the 3 represent. But 3s, there's so many different phrases and aspects of the number 3. There's the triple goddess. There's Brahma, Shiva, Vishnu. Well, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva in order. There's also the term 3's a charm. There's past, present, future. There's so many different ways that we can look at this number 3. One of the ways that I want to look at that was brought up last week was that Prophet Muhammad always did things 3 times. When he sipped coffee, he would sip it 3 times. And 3s, doing things in 3s is also something that's symbolic of all of our Sufi stories. Anytime we hear Sheikh Sufi tell a story, it's always on the 3rd time, on the 3rd day. It's always the 3rd where the revelation or the sum up of the story actually takes place. In Christianity, Christ being in the grave for 3 days. 3s always represent a spiritual completion of a process. So, moving forward, 3s are associated with expression, communication skills, being social, someone that is being creative, artistic, and inventions. Now, 3s also have their places of mastery where their energy can get scattered as well, because 3s are individuals that are very expressive and they're constantly communicating. They're constantly expressing. They're constantly being social and going to different social events. They're the quote unquote social butterfly. With that, you have to be careful because you exhaust your energy by running to and fro too much. So part of their lesson is learning how to balance being creative and communicative and expressive with also taking time to themselves to be in the silence. Last week, one of the sisters raised the point about putting yourself in a process and a space where you're able to receive. This is part of the mastery of the number 3. So much communication and spending outwardly that you're not taking the time to receive inwardly. That's one of the places where the number 3 wants to work on to gain a position of mastery. A few of the attributes that are connected to the number 3 is al-Musawwir, al-Khaliq, and az-Zahir. These are attributes of Allah that represents fashioning and creation and manifestation that could be tied to the number 3. And of course, for a chant or a zikr, Ya Musawwiru, Ya Khaliqu, Ya Zahiru, are chants that can be said to balance this number 3. The crystals that are in line with the number 3 are amethyst, sodalite, and amber is also a good crystal for the number 3. And colors are purple and yellow are helpful for the number 3. And the day of the week that the number 3 is related to is Wednesday. Does anybody have any questions or comments about this number 3? Or ideas or points that they want to share? They say 3's a charm. Cheikh Farad is obviously on his abjad and numerology when he talks about Ya Latif equaling up to 129, that 1, that 2, and that 9 equals a 3 when you reduce it. That's a great observation. Alhamdulillah. Someone says that they are a life path number 3. Being a life path number 3, does this information resonate with your particular life path? There's a lot of places that we're going to go with respect to these numbers as we move forward, because I'm just kind of tapping the surface. With each number comes different occupations that are aligned with that number, different times of the year that is aligned with that number, different compatibilities that are aligned with that. There's a lot of different components to it. So if you're talking about a life path being a number 3, there's certain ways that you can go about utilizing that in whatever occupation or life work that you find yourself engaged in. Or if it's not necessarily one of those occupations that would come up under a number 3, you can still utilize the characteristics of that number in whatever life path or occupation you find yourself working in. So it's not quite that stringent, but it does have a bearing and an effect on whatever it is that you do. So any questions?
Oh,
Bismillah.
my fault. You got me excited when you were talking about that life path 3, man. Yeah, no, yo, Cheikh, it definitely talks to my life path for sure. I was gonna say it's really cool. Well, you know, when we look at 1, 2, and 3, it's like looking at the Father, the Mother, and then the child, right? Like the Trinity.
Mm-hmm.
And the 3 is definitely synonymous with the child.
Right.
Even when you look at the 3, if you were to like maybe like tilt it to its right, it looks like 2 people trying to give a hug, like having their arms out wide, like a child would.
Mm-hmm.
You know, number 2 looks like somebody that's praying, you know, like they're kneeling, you know, or maybe, you know, a brother of mine I talked to, he's really into the numerology. He says it looks like it's somebody gardening.
Mm,
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
So like, yeah, it's really dope. But number 3 for sure, definitely speaks to me. being social, being artistic, you know what I'm saying? All of these different things. So for sure.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for bringing that up, because that brings us back to how we started our conversation on this number 3, where we talk about how the 3 is an offspring or a offspring of the 1 and the 2, but it's also the offspring of the 2 and the 1, which is what you just spoke to. The 2 being the 2 parents, and then the offspring being the 1, which is the child. Metaphysically, it's taught, speaking of this number 3, that parents, mother and father, represent 2 aspects of the same mind, or the right and left brain hemisphere. That would be the 1 and the 2. So then when you talk about the right brain and the left brain, and then what comes forth from that are the seeds, are the children, are the creation. Everything that we experience is the creation from the right and left hemisphere of our brain, the right and left side mind, coming forth, manifesting as results physically in our world. That's a production that takes place and is symbolized by this number 3.
Alhamdulillah, it's even wild. Like as I'm looking at the 3 right now, it looks like a pair of lips, like 2 lips, a top lip and a bottom lip, like as if you would kiss, you know, like a kiss from a child to the parent or the parent to a child. And I know I'm not tripping. I'm looking at the 3 right now, and it looks like that.
Yeah, and it also looks like a pair of lips, the top and the bottom lip.
Let's talk for the love. But yeah, that's wild, man.
All of that is in there. Alhamdulillah. Thanks for bringing that forward.
Thank you, Cheikh.
Anybody else got some comments or questions?
Assalamu alaikum, Cheikh. This is Sister Bathsheba. Assalamu alaikum to
Salam,
family.
sister.
This is phenomenal. I just want to say everything that you have said thus far, especially the number 3, is on point. It resonates with me 1000%. That's my
Wow.
life path number.
Oh,
And
okay.
everything I tend to do is in 3s. Everything. I even have 3 children. You know, and when it comes to professions, I'm an educator, a communicator, an artist.
Perfect.
It's just 3 it's me. And so whatever I do, I try to look for that 3, even if I'm buying a house or the number to an apartment or whatever it is, I try to look for the 3 and whatever it is that I do. And every time I do that, it's perfect. It's just a perfect arrangement. So thank you. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you. That is absolutely awesome. And yes, you have aligned with your life path being an educator.
Yes.
Because that gives you the opportunity to do expression and sharing,
Yes.
which is very much a part of this number 3, and being sociable, being in groups of people and around people. All of that's part of the number 3 as well. So yeah, you're moving right in alignment with that 3 energy.
Right. I think also our symbol is a triangle, a pyramid, isn't it? The number 3, geometrically?
Geometrically, yes. A triangle, yes.
Right, right. So that's, and you mentioned Lloyd Strahan. He's a friend of mine and a guide.
Oh.
So yeah, he's taught me a lot about this 3 also.
Awesome. Wow,
Yes.
I wasn't expecting that.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, that brother has done some phenomenal and continues to do phenomenal work in the field of numerology.
Absolutely.
So I'm very grateful for him.
Absolutely. Shukran.
Shukran, thanks so much for that.
You're welcome.
Anybody else want to talk about this 3 energy? Or the 1 or the 2? Or everything that we've summed up thus far?
Assalamu alaikum, Cheikh and family.
Wa alaikum salam.
So, of course, I pray all is well with you and that you're feeling good like Allah always should. My question is, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad talked of the number 3, and if I remember correctly, he stated that it, when you see the number 3, that it stands for trial. Something is being
That's correct.
tested. So, in line with that, my question was the trial the balance of the 1 and 2? Would that be the test, the trial aspect of it, testing your ability to master or to balance, or any of the other things that you shared in reference to the number 3?
Beautiful. Yes, thanks for that question. That number 3, coming from the teachings in the nation, as you mentioned, it represents tests and trials. And with these tests and trials, one of the ways that that is presented to us is from looking at it from a biblical perspective. When we look at the crucifixion of Christ, that represents the trial that he's going through for those 3 days before being victorious and resurrected into higher light. So he had to endure those. First, he had to endure and of course, this is a story that is conveying very spiritual concepts. He had to endure the abuse, the ridicule, the beating, and then the crucifixion. This is symbolic of tests and trials that we're going to go through in life. And then once we overcome this, then we are resurrected into higher light. And it happens in this symbolic symbol of this number 3, which is why, again, when we go back to the different terms that's used, that things come in 3s, or Prophet Muhammad did things in 3s, or whatever stories are told, it's always the 3rd time. The 3 represents tests and trials, but it also represents the victory in the completion of those tests and trials. I hope all of that answers the question.
Yes, I mean, thank you, Cheikh.
I mean, any more questions or comments or ideas, concerns, things we want to delve into a little differently? If not, then we're going to bring this to a close for this week. And next week, we're going to be getting into the science of the numbers 4, 5, and 6. And there'll be some heavy, heavy treasures in those, as well as we move into the 7, 8, and 9 in the following week. But when we get into the 4, 5, and 6, now we're talking about the Moni in the middle. These are the middle numbers, the middle pillar, and that represents their importance in the numeric process. Again, these numbers are taking us on a journey. We emerge from the nothingness, from the void, the triple blackness of space, the cipher, and we manifest as this number 1. Then we subdivide into the number 2, which represents the duality. And then with the 2 and the 1, or with the 1 and the 2, we end up in the creation and the expression of this number 3. And then next week, we're going to square that bad boy off with the number 4 and start talking about some of these corners, which is foundation and structure, to move forward on this process as we continue to live divine through this 1 and this 9. So that's how we're going to be moving, getting more insight and ideas about these numeric symbols and signatures and what they really represent and how we could use them for the betterment of self and those around us. Any more questions or comments or anything someone wants to be made clearer? There's enough of us here to help make it clear about Allah's grace. If it hasn't been made clear so far. I'm very excited and thankful for everybody that's showing up for this process and for showing up to yourself. Because with this, you're going to be able to take this information, utilize it not only for yourself, but help others understand themselves and help you understand what's going on around you. This is another form of our psychology. Numerology is a form of psychology, as is astrology, and it's from which all of these ologies end up coming from, or figments of mind chopped up into different disciplines. This is where they actually come from. The understanding of these symbols moving through and changing themselves, rearranging themselves into different forms and conveying different messages based on the form that they're presented as. So you're definitely going to be able to utilize this and understand what's going on around you and teach this as you continue to move forward on your path, just by continuing to show up for this little 8-week discourse on living divine between the 1 and the 9. Amin.
I mean,
So-
Cheikh.
I mean,
So with that, we are going to have a closing door. And let's see. Sister Ayeshe, I believe you done do it yourself into a job. If you're available, would you give us a closing door?
Thank you for the magnificent class.
Bismillah.
Bismillah. Come to you this evening, asking first and foremost, Creator and Creatress to forgive us of our sins, give us of our wrong intentions, give us of our wrongdoings. Forgive us for ignoring messages that have been sent to us from the universe. We ask that you allow us to learn to apply these numbers in our life, make a positive outcome, use them along our journey. We ask that you allow us to take in the understanding that Cheikh Idris has, knowing that he's the master of the numbers, knowing that he is the one who is able to give us understanding and insight on the numbers. We ask that you will remove all fear from those who have been told that numerology is some type of witchcraft, because we have created all these things and therefore a purpose, and it's for our personal use. We ask that you touch everyone's heart and then have them to realize that their walk is a personal encounter, that nobody's walk is alike. And that is exactly why you made us all uniquely and divinely different. We thank you, but we ask that you also bring our differences together so we can unite, unity like that one, like Sheikh Sufibar put in the chat. We need to bring us together and unify. Bring all the numbers together and let us represent their totalities to the fullest. let us recognize them as also attributes of Allah. Give you honor, glory, and praise this evening. We ask that you just continue to have us watch the stars and the moon. Have us become one with the universe. Have us enjoy our atmosphere. Have us protect Mother Nature. Have us do all those things for your glory. Do all those things that bring us power. Have us to learn to manifest our future, our word, thought, and deed. Give you praise once more and again. We ask all of these things in the Prophet's name. Amen.
Ameen, 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 ameen,
Ameen.
ameen.
Allahu Akbar.
Allahu Akbar. Thank you, sister, so much for that dua. And we receive all of that and pray and know that it will be applied to each and every person that's on this call.
Yes,
As- Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thanks so much for being present. Look forward to seeing you and hearing you on next week, on Friday, on Sunday, and every day moving forward.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Walaikum assalam. Love and light, fam.
Walaikum salam. Walaikum salam.
Beautiful, good teachings. Well accepted.
Alhamdulillah, Sheikh.